God willing, today we will be reading from Surah number 30, verse number 4. Uh, let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So, God willing, to read these, I'm just going to start from verse 1, since we didn't even touch on these really last time. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Surah 30, verse 1, ALM. Certainly the Romans will be defeated in the nearest land. After their defeat, they will rise again and win. The footnote says, see Appendix 1 for the detailed explanations of the previously mysterious initials. Within several years, such is God's decision, both in the first prophecy and the second. On that day, the believers shall rejoice in God's victory. He grants victory to whomever He wills. He is the Almighty, most merciful. So, in this surah, actually, there are some explanations about historically when this war happened, and this, I guess, the exact details are not really relevant as to what this war was and when it happened. But it was before the Quran was revealed that God prophesied that this would happen, and it actually took place. However, the thing to remember here also is that it also starts with ALM, the initials, and we know that these initials remain mysterious for the first 1400 years, and people did not have a clue what these initials were about. And we understand now that these initials are part of the Quran's miraculous mathematical code. And the details of this mathematical code are explained in Appendix 1. Basically, these prove to us that this book is divinely preserved, and it is letter by letter revealed to us by God. And there is no doubt in that this book has been revealed by God, and the mathematical miracle is a proof of the divine authorship of this Quran. And if a single word or a letter or a verse was to be removed from this book, it would be immediately exposed. And so this is how we understand that, God is the author of this book. And we understand here that these verses talks about how the Romans will be defeated by believing people, and then how the Romans will be defeated in the nearest land. After their defeat, they will rise again and win within several years. So the Romans are actually the believing Christians. My understanding is, and they are fighting against the disbelievers. And after some time, God says they will first be defeated, but after some time, they will rise again and win. Such as God's decision, both in the first prophecy and the second prophecy. On that day, God says the believers will rejoice in God's victory. He grants victory to whomever He wills. He's the Almighty, most merciful. Um, and then verse 6 says, such is God's promise, and God never breaks His promise, but most people do not know. So we see, and the subtitle also says preoccupation with the wrong life. We will read about that further. But what we see here is that, God grants victory to whomever He wills, grants victory to the believers, obviously. And, I mean, it shows here, God's decision, God's plan, that He even allows the defeat to happen first before He grants victory sometimes. And it's all part of God's plan. And obviously, so when we have setbacks, it's not necessarily bad for us. Maybe it's not the right time, or it's part of an elaborate plan by God, that His wisdom, based on His wisdom, that you know, um, it's probably best that you see defeat from a worldly perspective, but really decisively the victory will belong to the believers, and this is God's system. Now it says preoccupation with the wrong life, uh, such as God's promise, and God never breaks His promise, but most people do not know. So this is part of God's promise, and it says God never breaks His promise. Obviously, people break promises all the time, but we understand that God has a system and He has a promise for the believers. And if you fulfill your part of what is desired of you as a submitter, that God has a certain system and He promises victory for the believers, and He will give victory to the believers. And I think sometimes we lose faith, and we forget what God's promise is, and we may be disheartened. We may feel despairing of God's mercy, but God says none despairs of God's grace and His mercy except the disbelievers. So you could be very well be part of. It could very well be part of your admission test, where you could get a setback, and some people might get despaired and get exposed as hypocrites, while the believers will, be hopeful and imploring God for His victory. And this way, they will pass their test. It says preoccupation with the wrong life, right? So verse 7 says, they care only about things of this world that are visible to them, while being totally oblivious to the hereafter. So we can see that most disbelievers, they're only concerned about the worldly things, and this is why we see that most people will cheat, steal, do whatever they can, to gain things in the worldly life, and not caring about how they're going about getting them. Is it legitimate or not? If they see they have an opportunity to get away with it, they will do it. Like someone will see if they can cheat someone, if they can steal, if they have a way to survive and get away with it, you know, they will gladly do it. They'll do it to their own brothers and sisters, family. It doesn't matter, as long as they're getting the worldly things that they care about. Such people will go and do what they want, um, uh, because they're disbelievers in the hereafter. So in verse 8, God says, why do they not reflect on themselves? Did God did not create the heavens and the earth and everything between them, except for a specific purpose and for a specific lifespan. However, most people, with regard to meeting their Lord, are disbelievers. So God is asking, these people a rhetorical question, like, why don't they reflect on themselves? You know, if you reflect on your own self for like 2 minutes, I mean, you will be surprised, like how much there is to reflect about, and how that can turn someone into a believer right away. I mean, you have so much happening within your own body, even, and you think about the heavens and the earth. I mean, all this stuff, people should wonder like why it even exists. But people are not thinking about these things, right? I mean, it, it makes you wonder, like, people have no idea why they're here, and they don't care. They only care about what they see in front of it. Oh, there's money, let's go for it. Oh, there's a house I can buy. There's like this mansion. Oh, how do I get it? I mean, this is the kind of mentality. How do I get, I have 1 million, how do I get 2 million? I mean, of course the mind works really hard for those things, but they don't think about, okay, like, how, who is running all this? Like, why is this happening? Why are we here? They don't reflect on that. But God says everything's been made for a specific purpose and for a specific lifespan. People block all of those thoughts from ever entering their heads, because they are disbelievers in meeting God. They don't. They don't think it's going to happen, so they don't care, right? Why should I think about why I'm here if I don't believe I will be resurrected or anything? You know, I'm just here. I'm here. I mean, that's how they probably think, and this is where it ends, and then it starts wondering about otherworldly things. But God says, "Have they not roamed the earth and noted the consequences for those who preceded them? They used to be more powerful, more prosperous, and more productive on earth. Their messengers went to them with clear signs. Consequently, God was not the one who wronged them. They are the ones who wronged their own souls. The consequences for those who committed evil had to be evil. That is because they rejected God's revelations and ridiculed them." And so again, God is asking, have these people not roamed the earth and noted the consequences of all the communities in the past who rebelled against God and how God annihilated them? I mean, look at Pharaoh, for example, right? And God says they were more powerful, more prosperous, right? I mean, who would be more prosperous than and possess the greater legacy than Pharaoh and his troops and how powerful he was, for example, and how productive they were on Earth. I mean, how they were so productive. You know, they had these big armies that you know turned the impossible into possible in terms of construction. We can see, like, people still are in awe on all the architecture and everything that these people have accomplished in that era in society, right? I mean, so these were powerful people. I mean, not just Pharaoh, but other communities also. They carve mansions into rocks and things like that. I mean, these were very powerful people to have accomplished all of that. But God says their messengers went to them with clear proofs. But God is not the one who wronged them. They're the ones who wronged their own souls. So after everything that happened to them, where they were reduced, to nothing. All that happened to them, everything bad that happened to them was a result of their own decisions. God doesn't want to hurt a single creature, and nothing bad comes from God. God doesn't put a single disbeliever to hell, but humans are the ones who insist on going to hell, and God has put a system in place, and they just want to, you know, uh, insist on going to hell. So, I mean, God is not going to put a single person in hell. God wants people to be guided. He wants people to save themselves. That's why he created this earth, and that's why he sent us the book. He sent us the guidance every day. God has given us so many tools to use the chance we have every day to repent to God and to come back to God. And these people see the signs every day, right? They see the same sunset, sunrise, everything following God's orders, but they don't even reflect, and they're only concerned about one thing, the worldly life. Um, is all they're here for in this world. They have no other motivation uh, in life in this world than to go for the worldly things. And people who don't have that want, end up, for example, killing themselves or something like that, right? Otherwise, nobody has, any purpose or direction in this world, or an idea for a goal other than worldly goals, to become a billionaire or to have a business or to I don't know, jump off a plane or whatever. These are people's goals, and this is what these people are striving for, right? Nobody's thinking about the hereafter, wanting to please God, wanting to get a high rank in heaven, because they don't believe in it. So God says the people who committed evil, the consequences of their works had to be evil. I mean, these people end up going and committing themselves to hell for eternity, from which they're never going to come back, right? And this is because they rejected God's revelations and ridiculed them, Um, so, I mean, imagine God has sent us so many proofs, so many miracles, right? Um, God has sent us a messenger of the covenant, who has explained to us everything in plain English, has, given us such an elaborate mathematical miracle, has explained to us everything that we need to follow in the simplest terms. All we have to do is just hear and obey. you know and we have people that are still trying to change and twist the practices of religion, trying to twist the proofs, trying to twist everything, for their own gains. I see these days, for example, a whole army of people in India, for example, coming up with all kinds of absurd mathematical facts, like saying that the smoke will happen in 2115, and then same people are saying that the world will end in 2281 in March or something. Like when the message clearly said it will end at 2280, right? So they added 1 year to that. So people are insisting on going to hell, and they're rejecting God's revelations. So I mean, people are hurting their own souls, basically. I mean, God is not the one. I mean, God sends the guidance, God sends the messengers, God sends the clear revelations, and people insist on going to hell, fabricating lies, attributing them to God, insisting on their personal opinions, worshiping their own ego, all these things. And so God says in verse 11, idol worshippers disown their idols. God is the one who initiates the creation and repeats it. Ultimately, you will be returned to Him. On the day when the hour comes to pass, the guilty will be shocked. Their idols will have no power to intercede on their behalf. On the contrary, they will disown their idols. On the day when the hour comes to pass, they will part company. As for those who believe and lead a righteous life, they will be in paradise, rejoicing. As for those who disbelieve and reject our revelations and the meaning of the hereafter, they will last in the retribution forever. So we all know that on the day of judgment, all these idols will disown themselves, disown those people who idolize them. Obviously, these false religionists, preachers who are leading these people to hell will disown them. Right now, they're stuck to them like glue. Their followers are following them everywhere, and they are with their followers, for example, right? But on the day of judgment, God says these people will part company and disown one another and curse one another, and blame one another. They will be enemies of each other. Um, and God says those people who believe and lead a righteous life, they will be in paradise, happy and enjoying in complete bliss. The most beautiful feeling you could ever imagine, right? And then for the disbelievers, it will be the complete opposite. Right now in this world, it's hard to distinguish for us to see who's enjoying a perfect life and who's in hell. Who's victorious and who's not, who's successful, who isn't. But in the hereafter, it's going to be easy to tell. I mean, you could tell people in continuous misery burning in hell for eternity. They will last in the retribution forever. I mean, if you can just think about it, I mean, that should turn anyone into a believer if they really believed it, right? No one wants to be in a miserable position for their whole life, right? But because they don't believe in it, they don't care. Remember God always. Therefore, you shall glorify God when you retire at night and when you rise in the morning. All praise is due to Him in the heavens and the earth, throughout the evening as well as in the middle of your day. He produces the life from the dead and produces the dead from the life, and He revives the land after it had died. You are similarly resurrected. So we're being told by God always to worship Him alone, to remember God always, right? Whoever is on your mind, majority of your day is your God, right? And if God is not on your mind majority of the day, you're not worshiping God, period, and you're not going to make it to paradise. So we're being reminded that in order for us to make it, we have to glorify God when we retire at night, when we rise in the morning, as well as throughout the evening, as well as in the middle of our day, right? So that's pretty much all your day. You know, think about God. put God on your mind. If there's other things that are clouding your mind, I mean, get those thoughts out of your head. Just check yourself. Like, what were you thinking about yesterday all day? Was God your God yesterday? Was God your God the day before? If he wasn't, then you're in trouble, right? And we need to fix that now, before it's too late. If God is not our God, we're not going to make it simply, right? That's why most believers, quote unquote, are going to hell, because they're worshiping idols. And these things that are on people's minds, occupying their minds, most of the day, they're their gods. For a lot of people, they thinking about themselves, their appearance, their likes, the perception of them, things like that. I mean, those people, their gods are their egos. Some people are thinking about their spouse or their work. That's their god. Money, it's people's gods. People's children. Some people are worried about their children all the time. It becomes that becomes their idol. So we have to get rid of all these idols in our lives and make God our God. That's why we are here. This is what this whole test is about. All these distractions around us are created for a purpose, to test our innermost convictions. Are we going to worship God, or are we going to worship these worldly things? All these other things are worldly things, right? Your appearance, your perception, your children, your money, your work, your spouse, all these are worldly things. So, if you're preoccupied by these worldly things in your head, you're not worshiping God. And so you have to make God your God. Of course, you can think about these things also, but in what way are you thinking about them? If you're appreciating your children or your spouse or your work too, I mean, it has to be in context with God. You have to be thanking God for them, thanking God for your children, saying mashallah, things like that. When you appreciate them, for example, if you have a spouse or something, and or children, and you're thinking about them, you should appreciate God. Bring God into context, to remember Him, so that they don't become your idols. God becomes your God, because if these things become your idols, God says, whatever is your idol, eventually you will lose it, right? If you love your children so much, eventually you will lose them, because they will become your idols. You end up going to hell. You will not have any children in hell with you, the way you want. You want to be with your children in paradise, righteous children in paradise. Then you should worship God, think about God, appreciate God. And if your children make it, you will have them, right? Or at least you'll have them with you as long as you're here in this world. But otherwise, you're just hurting yourself. Verse 20, marriage, a divine institution. Among his proofs is that he created you from dust, then you became reproducing humans. Among his proofs is that he created for you spouses from among yourselves, in order to have tranquility and contentment with each other. And he placed in your hearts love and care towards your spouses. And this are sufficient proofs for people who think, right? Um, so, like, I could really talk about this in a lot of detail, how this is a proof from God, right? Um, but I mean, I have to be concise here. But I mean, the fact that God has created pairs of everything from nothing, from dust, I mean, an exact uh, match for you, with creating the opposite sex, and the attraction and the love that comes with it, the whole process, the whole chemistry, how God has put everything precisely in its place, and how God has created that whole system of reproduction. He talks about reproducing humans. I mean, that will stump anybody if they truly think about it. Anybody who doesn't believe in God, or doesn't believe in resurrection, even. I mean, just think about how God brings life from nothing and repeats it over and over with such preciseness. I mean, if you understand, how the genetics work and all this stuff. I mean, how God has calculated all of this and, creates it out of nothing, right? I mean, and not only just that, I mean, all the psychological things and all the hormonal things, everything that makes this whole thing possible. I mean, it's just immaculate, right? It's amazing to think about, how God has put it in place. Um, so these are part of God's proofs. God says He has created tranquility and contentment with your spouses. So it's a blessing from God that He has created spouses because also they provide us tranquility and contentment in our hearts. And He has put love and care, from the spouses for people, right? And so, I mean, how does that happen, right? If you are trying to talk about it from an evolutionary perspective, right? I mean, how does that even happen? But it's only God who's making all these forces possible, and making this whole elaborate system work, and how creation repeats itself every day. This is all proof of God's creation and His omnipotence. And that's the only explanation and nothing else. More proofs, verse 22. Among his proofs are the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and your colors. In these there are signs for the knowledgeable. Um, I'm just going to continue reading. There's so many proofs. Among his proofs is your sleeping during the night or the day, and your working in pursuit of his provisions. In this there are sufficient proofs for people who can hear. Among his proofs is that he shows you the lightning as a source of fear as well as hope. Then he sends down from the sky water to revive a land that has been dead. In these, there are sufficient proofs for people who understand. Among his proofs is that the heavens and the earth are standing at his disposal. Finally, when he calls you out of the earth, one call you will immediately come out. To him belongs everyone in the heavens and the earth. All are subservient to him, and he is the one who initiates the creation, then repeats it. It is even easier, this is even easier for him. To him belongs the most sublime similitude in the heavens and the earth, and he's the Almighty Most Wise. You know, so all these proofs, if you really think about them, they're mind blowing, really. Um, uh, the Among his proofs is the creation of the heavens and the earth. I mean, just think about the creation of the heavens and the earth and how all these gigantic heavenly bodies are placed into the sky and how they're moving in their own orbits in perfect harmony. You know, who, only God could make this whole thing possible, and not just everything just self-destruct itself, into a giant explosion. But God is the one who created it out of nothing and is making it work flawlessly. Um, Among his proofs is the variation in our languages. I mean, I always used to wonder as a kid, like, how how do people create these languages, and how they made up all these verbs and adjectives and everything. I mean, it's not possible for people to be able to create something, and for someone to someone to understand you. I mean, for you to create a language, if I want to create a language, for example, now, out of nothing, I'll have to tell myself the language, teach myself, make these words, and I have to communicate to other people what they would mean, and then for us to start talking. I mean, it's a lot of work, but God makes it all possible, for everyone all over the world. And these variations and styles, I mean, how God makes it works, only God can make it work, right? There's so many factors that would go into it. And for God to make the human brain, as flexible enough to be able to absorb, these languages and learn them, and speak them, all of this stuff, it's just doesn't happen out of thin air. I mean, God had to make us capable of doing that, and God is the one who controls all of that in our brains, right? He's made our brains so that we can do that. You can't teach, for example, human language to a cat and she starts speaking human, right? But God has made all these languages possible for human beings so that they can communicate with each other through all these various languages, right? But for example, a dog cannot speak these languages, no matter how hard you try, right? You cannot make him learn Spanish or English, but he makes humans learn and speak these languages, and then allows us to communicate with each other in a very precise manner, right? Um, so only God makes it possible. And the variations in our colors, I mean, if you think about how God makes all of that work too, I mean, not just us, but so many other creations of God that He has created with all the different colors. I mean, and all the features that He has created, like when we talk about races, for example, I mean, he has designed them, in real amazing proportions and balances that he has put in place, and there's beauty in all of this, right? Uh, Languages, colors, everything, and it just God's amazing design, shows in everything that He has created. He is omnipotent, and that's all you see, from these proofs. I mean, you're being told that God is the one who is making all this work. I mean, it just doesn't happen by itself. Among His proofs is lightning that He shows you to revive dead land. I mean, how that whole process works with evaporation and then condensation and rain. I mean, God makes it all possible through through a very sophisticated design that He has put in place, a very sophisticated system. Um, Among His proofs is the heavens and the earth standing at His disposal. Obviously, the earth, uh, could be knocked out by now. If you just think about something haphazard, put in space like this. Simple probability will tell you that. But God is the one who has made it work, has protected it through various forces, and made possible for the earth to survive as long as it has. Of course, everything is in accordance with God's will. Um, and God says, to Him belongs the most sublime similitude. All the beautiful names belong to God. I mean, um, you cannot put in words, the right phrases or the right description of God's beauty and how amazing He is and His greatness. Our minds are simply not capable to absorb or comprehend any of it, you know. But we just worship Him alone. Just all that God wants us to do for everything that He has created for us is to be appreciative and to worship Him alone. I mean, all these are blessings from God. Imagine if one of these things were missing from this world. I mean, the world would be such an impossible place to survive in, with spouses, with love, with care that God has created, families, right? I mean, if all these things didn't exist, um, life would be impossible. Um, uh, I mean, obviously, repeating creation is part of it. Having water, having everything, fruits, vegetables, all these things, life support that God has created. This whole entire system is all from God, and He has made it all work for us. So all we have to do for everything that He has done, I mean, all of this is priceless, but all we need to do is to worship Him, thank Him, be appreciative to Him in return, so we can save ourselves. God doesn't gain obviously anything out of that. Absurdity of idol worship. He cites for you here an example from among yourselves. Do you ever elevate your servants or subordinates to the level where they rival you, and to point and to the point that you pay them as much allegiance as is being paid to you? We thus explain the revelations for people who understand. Indeed, the transgressors have followed their own opinions without knowledge. Who then can guide those who have been sent astray by God? No one can ever help them. So, God says about talks about the absurdity of idol worship, and I mean it is absurd because you will never have servants, for example, and have a business, and then give your servant half of the company, right, to control as another half of the CEO, right? But God doesn't do that. So I mean, imagine like you have the heavens and the earth, and people thinking, you have as a servant, all these messengers and prophets, these are servants of God, and then, you decided to make them into a God, right? Doesn't make any sense. Obviously, first God said there'll be chaos on earth if that was to happen. But then the whole entire absurdity of it, like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, why would you have a servant and then turn him into a God? And why would you need another god in the first place? I mean, you are the CEO of a company, let's say. You're running the company, you're in charge. I mean, why would you create your servant into another half CEO, for example, and give him half of your earnings also, for no reason? I mean, nobody does that, right? I mean, there's no company in history that I can think of that has ever uh, you know done such a thing, right? It's unheard of, and God says it's absurd. And if anybody has done that, they're not really intelligent. But God says that this is the absurdity of that. People doing that. This is illogical, basically. And God says that um, people have followed their own opinions without knowledge. Who then can guide those who have been sent astray by God? No one can ever help them. So when you see people that are stuck in this thing, you cannot do anything to help them at all. When people follow their own opinions without knowledge, I mean, it is very absurd also, and you can't do anything to help such people, who are in love with their own opinions. Their ego becomes their god. Nothing nothing enters that brain of theirs. I mean, if you ever have experience talking to such people, you will see that whatever you tell them, if they have a certain personal opinion they're in love with, you can do whatever you can. There, nothing will enter their head. They will not see what you're saying, and even if their ideas are based entirely on on no facts, just wrong information. Like I was recently, talking to this person who I think we have discussed in detail, where this person had some really strong personal opinions about homosexuality, right, and what they were saying and blaming God for it, right, and all that was based without knowledge, entirely on personal opinion, right? Nothing truly scientific to back it up. I mean, all the so-called scientific explanations that are presented were all flawed, and I had proven to them that they're all flawed, and this is all a myth. But he could not get past his opinion, just that what in his head that he has accepted as a fact, right? And you can go and explain till the cows come home, as they have this expression, that this is not the case. But someone who has a who's following their personal opinions without knowledge, I mean, God does not guide them. They're sent astray by God. So whatever you say to them, they can never be helped. God says no one can ever help them, right? And this is God's system. So, verse 30, monotheism, natural instinct. Therefore, you shall devote yourselves to the religion of strict monotheism, such as the natural instinct placed into the people by God. Such creation of God will never change. This is the perfect religion, but most people do not know. Footnotes for verse 30 says, recognizing God alone as our Lord and Master is a natural instinct. We are born into this world with such an instinct. See 7 172 and 173 and Appendix 7. So 7 172 says, We are born with instinctive knowledge about God. Recall that your Lord summoned all the descendants of Adam and had them bear witness for themselves. Am I not your Lord? They all said, Yes, we bear witness. Thus you cannot say on the day of resurrection, We were not aware of this. Nor can you say it was our parents who practiced idolatry, and we simply followed in their footsteps. Will you punish us because of what others have innovated? So we see that God has given us instinctive knowledge. The natural instinct that has been placed in us is to worship God alone. Therefore, we have to devote our religion, devote ourselves, as it says, to the religion of strict monotheism, right? So submission is strict monotheism. We have to worship God alone, strictly worship God alone, um, strictly follow Him alone. Strictly follow the Quran alone. Um, Strictly not follow anybody else's opinions or our own personal opinions. This is the religion. So God is telling us to do that. Um, God says, "You shall submit to Him, reverence Him, observe the contact prayer salat, and whatever you do not ever fall into idol worship." Sectarianism condemned. Do not fall into idol worship like those who divided their religion into sects, each party rejoicing with what they have. So it's very important to remember here that, it's talking about people dividing their religion into sects and falling into idol worship. Um, and so the so obviously, the idea is people falling into idol worship and following certain sources other than the Quran. uh, you know we see that's what happened with Shia and Sunni, for example, right? There are two sects, major sects in Islam. They divided themselves into sects, they created certain idols, they started following them, and they fell into idol worship, and they divided the religion based on that. Each party is happy with what they have. A perfect example, right? And so we should not be like that. We have the Quran alone as a source of our guidance, and we have to just follow that and not be divided and uphold idol worship like these other sects. Very simple. Um, um, God says, now sometimes people misuse these verses, and I don't particularly obviously like it. When people say, well, you are, because you're saying something about this other people, this other group of people that are doing things, let's say circumcision, now you're dividing yourself from them because you're saying that these people are not submitters and you're committing idol worship. Like just this totally misinterpreting the concept of idol worship and destroying. I mean, obviously, the people who are doing these things, let's talk about circumcision, for example, right? They're upholding another source besides the Quran. They're dividing themselves from the religion. They are committing idol worship by doing that, right? But you saying this is what they're doing doesn't make you an idol worshiper. They're saying, no, no, it's just a small thing, just let it be and don't divide yourselves. But this is not how it works. Not dividing is not you holding hands and staying in the same room together and say, oh, we're all brothers and sisters. This is not what it's telling you about. It's not telling you to form like a social club or something where everything goes and you're all brothers and sisters no matter what you do. I mean, God is telling us about a system to adhere to. Follow these practices, worship God alone, follow this religion alone. Do not innovate, do not idolize. Follow the strict religion of monotheism and do not divide your religion into these things. So people who do that, and someone decides to become a circumcisionist, then he's the one or she's the one who has divided herself. Or someone decides to follow another day for end of the world and have another fake messenger and start creating all these ideas, or people like Adipians or all these other groups that decide to divide themselves and follow personal opinion or follow other idols like Adib, for example. Or I'm giving these examples because this is how In submission, you can have them, right? I mean, the submission in submission, people are not necessarily going to follow, these books of hadith and other things, but they will follow simple ideas, similar ideas, where they'll set up another source or another person as an idol, and they'll start following that and divide the religion and fall into idol worship. Bad weather friends. When adversity afflicts the people, they turn to their Lord, totally devoting themselves to Him. But then, as soon as He showers them with mercy, some of them revert to idol worship. Let them be unappreciative of what we have given them. Enjoy temporarily, you will surely find out. And the footnote for 33 says a common example is the classified advertisements we note in the newspapers placed by people thanking St. Jude for healing them. Before undergoing surgery, they sincerely implore God to heal them, but as soon as the surgery succeeds, they thank St. Jude. So, so these are bad weather friends. I mean, there are good weather friends and bad weather friends, and obviously, people go through their admissions test also to prove that they're neither bad weather or good weather friends, but there are people who will worship God alone under all circumstances, right? But these people clearly expose themselves that when they're in adversity, they just give up all idols and worship God alone. And when they're healed, they're no longer in danger to start worshiping idols again. I mean, there were several examples of that. One famous example to me is that of Cat Stevens. When he was a Christian, and then in his own words, when he was drowning, he turned to God alone and said, like, you guide me and this and that. And after, if you guide me, like, I will worship you alone. And then God helped him, and then obviously, he's singing about Muhammad and all this stuff. Like we all know, it's all public information, right? And also all these people, there's so many other people like that do that, and they turn to God, and then when God helps them, then they go on the same path with Jesus or Muhammad or any other idols, they start following those religions. All right, they forget about God alone at that point. So this is, I mean, some people, depending on their belief, they have those certain idols, right? So people here will thank Saint Jude when they're healed, and other people will thank other imams or other saints for healing them. Depending on where the idolatrous beliefs come from. I mean, people will thank dead men, for the children that are born in this world. They'll go to their graves to pray for children, for example, when their children happen. I mean, as absurd as it sounds, they'll go to a dead person and thank them for giving them the child. Um, so bad. But the bigger absurdity is that of idol worship. Because God is the one who gives us all these things, and so to thank another individual or another entity or whatever it is, is very wrong. And we have the example also of, like, for example, a parent, doing everything for the child their whole life, and then the child growing up and thanking someone else for it. I mean, this is somewhat close to, how God has created us and everything that He has given us, that, we go and thank someone else. Like, God has given us our eyes, our brains, everything that we know, all the blessings so far. I mean, He is whatever we are up until now, all credit goes to God, right? And so here, somebody devotes their life to Muhammad, is everything, or Jesus. It's very, very absurd and ridiculous. And obviously, any person who fails that test, obviously deserves, God says, to go to hell for that. So may God help us and guide us not to be among those people, and allow us to be guided in worshiping God alone under all circumstances. So with this, I will end, God willing. And if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
MashaAllah, God bless you.
MashaAllah, brother. Awesome
MashaAllah,
question.
brother.
Thank you.
Praise God.
MashaAllah, brother.
MashaAllah, brother.
MashaAllah, brother. Praise God.
MashaAllah, brother. Before I make a comment, can I introduce myself, brother? Or
Yes.
Sure.
yeah, because actually I know all of you guys from long times. I listen the Quran study on YouTube most of the time in my flexible time. Sometimes I join, I watch in the live video. Sometimes I listen after when I get time. Yeah. So and I have been listening your studies almost. I have been almost 2 years now. Yeah, and I sometimes I make comments and I ask some questions also. Long time, yeah, I think 1 year ago. So my background is actually anyway my English is not so good. It's what I think. I hope you'll understand. So and I am born and brought up in Bangladesh and also raised in a traditional Sunni family. So
I thought
um,
you were English because it says your name is English.
yeah. Yeah, so you know, just before I think I became a submitter almost two year and a half. So and from my childhood, I was always searching for the truth. The religion I believe. I had so many questions to ask. But you cannot ask those questions even if you have in your mind so many things going on. Likewise, say the initial of uh, the Quran, like Alif Lam Mim. So and from the childhood, I was just, I know that this information only God knows. Nobody knows what is the meaning of Alif Lam Mim. So I was asking myself, how it's possible? So why God, put this kind of word in the Quran if there is a no meaning? Only God will understand, and there is nothing for us. So how can it possible? So, mashallah, when I listened the explanation of Rashid Khalifa, and it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. I said, yeah, this will be the true meaning, and God, hides for for a specific time to discover it. So I was so open-minded, and that is another reason to accept Rashid Khalif as a messenger of covenant. Yeah. So
Okay, but so the way we work in our format is that so when we go to the verses, for the first half, we talk about the verses if we have comments or questions about the verses,
mm,
and then after that, we talk about off-topic comments or comments or
mm,
questions about off-topic issues.
okay.
Mm,
So
mashallah.
and I have a question, some questions. So should I ask this question after the Quran study or any other
Well, I mean,
subtopic?
if they're off topic, meaning like if they're not related to these verses that we read, then we talk about them after we talk about these verses.
Uh,
Yes.
okay. So I stop here right now. Yeah. Inshallah.
MashaAllah, brother, welcome. I actually wanted to talk about something you mentioned about and also God emphasizes that whatever occupies your mind, we have one of the comments in the subtitle is your God, and so we should be very careful, and it takes practice. We should be very mindful. We should actually, as you said, check ourselves, see what we are thinking about during the day, and it's so easy to get carried away to become part of the crowd. Like when you are in your office, you see that people are like listening to their companions all the time, and subhanallah, they don't run out of absurd topics. They have all the worries and all the troubles of the world like coming to them. They are constantly in feeling anxiety, and like, and some of the topics after you become a submitter becomes very funny to you. They are so worried, and they are like, for instance, right now, in Iran there are uprisings and people are killing each other, and but subhanallah, you know what's going on. You know that people should change in order to receive God's help and his support. And these uprisings are not going to get anywhere unless people become submitters and they actually ask God for help, not asking their egos and trusting their egos and coming to the streets and trying to kill each other. But you see how Satan is actually flooding people with all these anxiety and worries that they are not even in their own country. Still they are so worried, and their mind is so occupied with what's going on with their country. And they are idolizing their ethnicity and their nationality, and how instead of thinking that this is my last chance and I should just save my own neck, they are worrying about something they have no control over. And this leads to physical problems, and they I don't know, having accidents here, like, because their mind is occupied. So what I understand is that Satan uses every excuse or everything, and even creates problems nationwide to just imprison our mind and to occupy our mind every second, and just he doesn't leave us alone. And we should be careful. We should be think about God Almighty and how safe we are as submitters, and how everybody could be safe if they just believe in God and know that they are not in control. And just think of every second when I don't know, when they have a good job, when they are in a good country, when they are safe. Start reading the Quran, understanding God's message, rather than listening to corrupted religious leaders, and then coming to the conclusion that Islam is not the solution. We know that Satan is trying to destroy the image of Islam, and is giving us all these false ideas that what's going on in so-called religious countries is actually the true Islam. And the people who listen to Satan and his ideas and actually follow the news on those countries are going to lose their chance to think about God and to redeem themselves. So I just wanted to mention that it's like we shouldn't listen to everything. We should just focus on ourselves and try to control our thoughts, inshallah.
That's true, mashallah, sister. That is so true. People's or minds are so occupied. Sometimes, you wonder, like you're at work and people talk endlessly about one topic to another, and if you really sit down and listen to them, is nothing makes any sense. Most of their talk about is there's out of their control, and for nonsense worrying about something that doesn't even make sense. And to fuel the fire, all these news channels and the broadcast, and they put spices on the news so much to make it so big. And for them it's money, for the TV channels and all that stuff. But at the same time they feed so much in people's mind. When someone says no wonder they call it program, the TV program, because they're really programming your brain. and your mind is consistently occupied with all the thoughts, what's going on in the world. Like you mentioned, Iran. We have many other countries are suffering. The whole Europe is suffering big time with a lot of crisis. To me, this could be like this verse God says in the Quran, where Surah 16, 112. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. God cites the example of a community that used to be secure and prosperous, with provisions coming to it from everywhere, but then it turned unappreciative of God's blessings. Consequently, God caused them to taste the hardship and starvation and insecurity. Such is the requital for what they did. And it seems like we are turning into that kind of situation. God has blessed the whole world with so much wealth, uh, and the first taste of that was it came in the sense of disease, as we just learned the last 2 3 years. And people, when that started, people becoming, everybody was mentioning God. People were so afraid what will happen. And then when things were better, people, no, nobody even mentioned God alone. I even heard the channels talking about God alone, praying to God from that disease. And now is the other thing is happening, the starvation and the whole world economic crisis that is happening. And that could very well because people were so unappreciative. And the only thing you can do to be secure in these uncertain times is to be hold on to God's rope so securely, because this is the only thing that will save you in any kind of crisis, that you submit and worship God alone with all your heart. And mashallah, how you mentioned that, your God is what is occupies your mind. Many times when something bad happens to us, like we get so those pinches, we think about, did I make any mistake? Or, but we also forget to realize, what about maybe if I didn't make any mistake, what about who was my God on that day? Like, Tuesday, you get 2 3 pinches, you get a flat tire, you get this happen, you get that happen, and you start thinking, did I make any mistake? But do we realize how much I remember God that day? Maybe God was not my God that day, that's why I suffered all this stuff. So in these uncertain times, the best thing to do is just wholeheartedly do as best we can to hold on to God's word. Mashallah, praise God.
Maria, we can't hear you. I think we're just getting static from you. Yeah, mashallah. I think for people who believe in God, they should not be worrying about these things, or uh, God says that those who worship God alone, they should have no fear and no grief. So just remembering that whatever the economy, wherever the economy is going, that God is the one who provides for us no matter what, and He will provide for us. We just have to worship Him alone and thank Him for all the provisions. Do the right thing, and He will provide for us.
And mashallah, how you were saying there, the people, they pray to God when they get well. They this thank doctors and saint and all those stuff. Well, it's one courtesy if you're in the hospital and you get cured, it's a courtesy to say thank to the doctor. But ultimately, in your heart, you want to mention that mashallah, God make me well, and thank you, doctor, for operating on me. Things like that. But our ultimate thank goes to God. He's the one save us. It's very sad. Openly, people talk about, like we're talking to someone, and then we say that, why do you praise Prophet so much? Why is that? Quran starts with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. praise be to God, the Lord of the universe. There's nobody else mentioned in this, the first surah, or anywhere in the Quran. Only God is the one is supposed to be praised. Let's see here. Uh, and then what is the utterances coming out of their mouth is, well, the Prophet Muhammad brought us the Quran, so that is the reason they're praising him, because they say, if had it was not for him, how would have he gotten the Quran? This is the uttering of, I mean, this is a huge blasphemy against God. I mean, what do you think, if he was not there and God cannot deliver the Quran to us? Is that what you're saying? I mean, he himself says through the verses in the Quran that I am no more than a warner, and God is telling him to say to them. But their blasphemy is because we got the Quran through a prophet, and so we have to praise him. What absurdity is that? MashaAllah, praise God.
Mashallah, Brother Ali. I am listening to you from long time. So when you explain and you explain the Quran, and you give good examples, nice, beautiful examples, and it helped me a lot, to understand and to increase faith. Yeah, mashallah, God give you very good knowledge. As well as Brother Suleman, everybody has any question, and I see that most they ask Brother Suleman. Mashallah, God give good wisdom and knowledge, and he explains things very nicely. I like it. And I want to comment on the verses here on Surah, yeah, the same Surah. What is, yeah, so in the worldly life, there is just I see the verses here. They pre they preoccupied in the worldly life. I saw a
Yeah,
verses
verse
here.
6, Surah
Okay.
30, verse 6,
Oh
right?
yeah.
7, verse 7.
Oh yeah. 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 Such is God promised there. Falling totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I had a small office in the community. So after I I become a submitter. So now I realize the truth of every verse in the Quran. So what is God saying in the Quran? And if we see and we in the worldly life and we see the truth, and every time I talk to the people, most of the people, and they start talking, say, look, hi, how are you, and start going to the worldly life. How many houses he bought? Oh, I bought this house. And what about your children? Oh, my children is going to this college and is doing always only for the worldly life. So actually nowadays, I don't want to listen of this thing. But as soon as I meet them, they come to my office or somewhere, start doing the same thing. Even though I explain so many things, but still, even though they have so many houses, I see so many things, and they're buying one after one after another. Still, when they come to me, I meet them, and they have so many problems, so many things, but they don't realize that this worldly life is not going to give give them happiness. So yeah, so this is the truth of the Quran. When I read the Quran verses now, and I see every day the miracle, the truth. MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, MashaAllah, brother. What is your name? But if you don't mind saying.
Uh, Yeah, Nizamul Shahir. Yeah, people also call me sometimes Nizam, and most of the people Shahir, Nizamul Shahir. Yeah,
Shahid.
yeah, I can call me
Tahir.
Shahir. Shahir, Shahir, Shahir.
Shahir. Okay, with R. Okay.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
Yeah,
Praise
you
God.
can.
MashaAllah, praise God, yes. Yeah, Masha, thank you for the comment. This is all, nothing good comes from us. Basically, that's a straightforward formula from the Quran, Surah 4, verse 79, that anything that good happens to us is from God. Anything that bad happens to us is from us. So if you see any positivity in our group, any positivity, that all came purely from God. We didn't do anything, zero. In fact, we run in minus numbers. Our soul, our body is just continuously producing minus. It's just God's blessing that it puts us in the positive side, and we are nothing more than that. All praise be to God, mashallah.
Yes, yeah, mashallah. I thanks always every day, thanks God, so yeah, he's the one, giving some, using some tools, to get the guidance. So, God, guide me and he is showing, So actually I was searching through the internet, the submitted alone, God alone. So suddenly I found this YouTube video like 2 years before. So and I start listening this Quran study myself, and
Mm.
nobody told me that there is any say I was just searching the YouTube and the Google, whatever I see, and before I came to submission, and I was looking Quran alone, miracle of Quran, God alone, and I see anything, and I try to see the truth, so that's the way I got this Quran alone TV, and I was listening from that time. Yeah, from 2 years, I think most of your Quran studies I have listened. Yeah,
Inshallah.
hopefully.
Inshallah.
Yeah,
Okay, brother.
mashallah. Yeah, I strongly encourage to use the Quran's verses as a prayer, as a dua. God says to say, "Rabbi zidni ilma," my Lord, increase my knowledge. That's a very beautiful dua. You do that as a zikr time to time, or in the morning, or however, it literally will increase your knowledge, because this who is saying, the most gracious is saying, say Rabbi zidni ilma, to increase my knowledge, and it will happen if you really believe and have full trust in God. MashaAllah.
Mashallah, I also wanted to comment about those who are preoccupied with this worldly life. We see many examples of them around us. And as the messenger of the covenant actually explained, he said that people might have so much money, but they might be very wealthy, but they are still needy. They are very much in need. They need because they are never content. And as we know from the verses of the Quran, God gives us contentment. So He promises, mashallah, an eternal life and that we can't even imagine. And He tells us that this life and whatever you have here is nil compared to that life. And He gives us contentment, which is a true blessing. You just might go to a simple coffee shop, I don't know, have a cup of coffee, and you feel like you own the world, and you are so happy all the time. And because you are not expecting to get anything from this world except guidance and the chance to redeem yourself, and you are not in need all the time. I've seen many people around me, mashallah, they have multiple properties, and they have so much best cars, and they are still looking at like other people and what they have, and they are trying to get that, so they are always in need. And well, I can't judge them, but I don't think they are even making any sort of charities, or they don't do their zakat charity, because they're always in need. No matter how much God gives them, they're still not content, they're not happy inside.
Yeah, absolutely, sister. That is so true. Even the Mr. Rashad Khalifa also says that the money has, I mean, paraphrasing his words, that money has no play whatsoever in giving you happiness. That part is come from your soul. It's kind of like saying, your tongue is the only source to give you taste. You put your food in your hand, you're not going to feel any taste in it until you put it on your tongue. That's when you taste. So similarly, the organ that gives you happiness, it lies with soul. If your soul is not developed, then you will not feel the happiness. These tiny pinches of jokes that we get, you buy a brand new car, or you do something, or you go on a vacation, that's just a spark that just gives you some happiness, and right after that is gone. I mean, why would people will then be not happy with what they have? Because it's not giving them happiness. It's purely coming from your soul. And how that organ is developed is by worshiping God alone, by being appreciative. Another word for disbeliever is unappreciative. That's the same reference is used. They both cross are used together. Disbeliever or unappreciative is same thing. So a believer, a true believer, is the one who appreciates God's blessings. And it's a formula of the Quran that God says, the more you thank me, the more I give you. I mean, this is indeed, when you see this kind of verses, then you can cry a river on these kind of verses, that my Lord is saying that the more I thank him, he will even give me even more. He's inviting me to say thanks to him. I mean, what a blessing that is. I mean, God doesn't need our thanks. He's inviting us to say thanks to him, that he will give us more. I mean, you start to build a real connection with your creator by reading this kind of verses. You forget about material things. When you say thanks, you're not thanking for even more. You're thanking because my Lord is so merciful, and he's love. He's has so much love for me, that he's I mean, there come a point in your life that you will not even, you stop praying for things, material things, because he has blessed you so much that you don't even pray. It's to the point that somebody will ask you, do you have any prayer, and you will stop and think, oh, what do I need? And you have no prayers left, because everything has been given to you. All you have is thanks. You thank God for your eyes and ears and your body and your home. You don't have any sickness. All you're doing is thanking. You are not asking for anything, because you have everything. And that is the ultimate place to be. Mashallah, praise God. Also, I want to make a quick comment on these verses. Verse number 21, verse number 22, verse number 23, and verse number 24. You see a pattern in these verses, and they end with similar thing. uh, these are there are there are sufficient proofs for people who think. There are signs for the knowledgeable, and there are sufficient proofs for people who can hear. And the last one is there are sufficient proofs for people who understand. So, you know people who can think, who can hear. First of all, you I mean, you hear and you think, and then you understand, and then you have knowledge. I mean, these are the people who ponder, who think out of the box. And most people, they follow what have been given to them blindly. They don't want to think, they don't want to hear, they don't want to understand, they don't want to observe knowledge. They clearly flat out reject what is present to you. And mashallah, in the beginning, my brother, you said that these initials of the Quran are mysterious. And mashallah, I realized when you were talking, and I realized, yes, I used to wonder before submission, since childhood, that why are these initial in the Quran? These There has to be some reason, but they're just there. And then we learn in the Miracle of 19, and then I think 4 or 5 surahs right after the initials, God says these are the proofs of this book. And nobody even ever ponder upon why this verse is written right after the initials. These are the proofs of this scripture. I mean, even that time, somebody could have gotten a clue that these are proofs. So maybe 19 would have popped up, but God protected it for the messenger to come to deliver the message. Mashallah.
MashaAllah, brother. I just wanted to make a comment on the verses that you just mentioned and the fact that, what we see with people around us, with regard to those who are absolutely preoccupied with this world, is that they think that, as Shima mentioned, Dr. Rashad Khalifa said that they are needy people, So basically, they have like a need in their mind for material needs or material things like luxuries. Or I mean, like for example, they have a car, or they have two cars, or they have three cars, or even they have four cars, but they want more and more and more and more, And then, interestingly enough, I have people like around me that they have like so many cars that they have to come to work like each day for with one car because the cars have become like liabilities for them because if they don't move them, then there would be problems obviously with the cars. So we see that like what I see in them is that instead of enjoying the cars and instead of using the cars have become like a sort of a liability for them and has become a great preoccupation for them because obviously if you have like several cars you have to take them to mechanics, you have to take care of them and things like that. The same goes with other worldly things. So if you keep yourself preoccupied with them, or if we say that if you decide to be preoccupied with the worldly things, you won't even have time to listen, let alone have time to think, So this is a blessing of God that God has given us contentment. I don't exactly remember the verse, but off the top of my head, and I'm paraphrasing, God said that we augment the faith of those who have believed with contentment. And now I understand what it means. Because when God gives you contentment, you are satisfied with what you have and you understand, mashallah, how you should spend your time or on what things your time needs to be spent. And that is as we have in the last verse of Surah Hajj, Surah 22. We should actually make efforts in the path of God, however we can, And it is not right now that we should go to war in the sense of like picking up a weapon and then going and fighting the disbelievers, The way that we can fight the disbelievers is via the and as well as idol worshippers, is to use the media, to use YouTube, to use like knowledge to fight the fallacy that they are making every day, day in, day out. They're creating a lot of nonsense content, and there is no shortage of them in the world. It is like simply enough that there was a time that for example, you turned on the TV and then you could go from one channel to another channel to another channel. And then by the 20th channel, basically you would have had like confusion because of the variety of the information and to a great extent, disconnected information and false information that would enter your brain. Right now, YouTube is the same. You just like open the app for the YouTube, you see that like uh, nonsense topics and completely disconnected and completely irrelevant are suggested to you. And if you just like go through them by the 20th clip, you don't have any focus, at all. So, so the point that I wanted to make is that the, I mean, if this should be this should be a blessing from God that people can hear, so that correct information is entered your brain, and then you are thinking about that correct information to make the connections in your mind and then understand what's going on, like brother Shahir here, he has been listening to the Quran studies for a long time, and this is a blessing from God that we have this technology that we can like record the sessions, we can stream them live, and then we can record like have the recordings and then go back to them, take them forward, backward, listen to them. If we miss the part, think about it, pause it. This is a blessing from God. This is a great um, actually technology. But whether we use this technology in the good cause to make ourselves redeemed, or to just waste our time and keep ourselves busy with nonsense day in day out, that is that is something that we decide. And this should be a blessing from God, that we are preoccupied with good things and not bad things. Subhanallah.
Mashallah. So, I guess at this point, if there are any off-topic questions also or comments, we can also discuss those. So, Brother Shade, if you had your questions, I mean, I guess it's a good time to discuss those, God willing, or anybody else.
Uh, okay, brother. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was having, some issues about the circumcision. So I think, is there any way we can discuss also offline sometime later after that?
Well, I mean, is it something that you don't feel comfortable talking about on the air, on streaming?
Yeah. Something I can discuss now, but something I think
Okay, well,
it,
let's discuss the parts that we can discuss, and then other
mm,
parts we can discuss offline, right?
oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so about the circumcision, so now I realize that, between the Samhita community and there is different understanding, and the community I am going now from more than 1 year, in Juma
Mm-hmm.
prayer. So there is, different kinds of understanding. Some people go to the masjid to some people like that, but we have to have communities and we have to pray the Juma. Then, I go Juma, and even there is some different understanding, so because I don't have any person to pray, in Juma. So then, I need some meter. At least there is no ideal worship. So that's how I think, and then I go to Juma. And there is also now, most of them, they believe the circumcision. So as per the Quran, and I realized, I think, and I think, how come God gives something like that circumcision? It's not looking good. And if I do the circumcision, and there is so many verses, it be, I find contradiction, some verses in the Quran. So so what is the point of view about the circumcision? So the people are doing the circumcision. So should so what I can do?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you said that at least you said you're going there because, especially first of all, I know everybody, not everybody, but a lot of the people that you're talking about, that community, and the way I know it is because they became very close to the people that have been very active here in California in promoting this, right? And so these people were very closely in contact with them, and they were joining their Quran studies, and that's how circumcision, uh, concept of circumcision was brought into their belief system as well, right? Now, if they are following that, which they are, we know they are. So the thing is, we're saying that we can go and pray with them because at least they're not idol worshippers. But the thing is, based on the Quran, they are idol worshippers, and God says that any place where masjid, establishment, right, where the worship practices are not absolutely devoted to God alone, uh, it's a masjid that you're not supposed to pray in, right? And so they're a masjid now. I mean, if you want to understand our perspective, or my perspective at least, is that the worship practices are not devoted to God alone when the worship practices are other than the worship practices that are given to you. Like, for example, if God says to you that you're supposed to pray 2 units of dawn prayer, and then someone says, no, you're supposed to do 3 units. Now, even those 3 units, you're praying to God alone in your head, But the thing is, God is not the one who's telling you to do that third unit. There's another God besides God that is commanding you to do that other unit, right? That is your God that is telling you. So you're being an idol worshiper by doing that. So these people that are following these other practices besides the Quran, they're actually idol worshippers, because God is not the one who's telling them to do circumcision. It's another God besides God who is commanding them to do these practices. So their practices are not devoted absolutely to God alone. They have invented other practices into the religion, or reinvented, and they're following those. So personally, like, I wouldn't pray with them, and I wouldn't tell anybody to pray with them, because it's not, the thing is, it's not like God has said if they're following one practice of idol worship, then it's okay as long as they're not following all the other practices, right? There's no magic number that you have a threshold. It's all about the principle, like, you're supposed to pray with people who are worshiping God alone, and following Quran alone. Now these people are not even following Quran alone, because now they have another source besides Quran that they are following, and that tantamount to idol worship, as we see in Surah 6 in many verses, and many other verses in the Quran. And God says also, I mean, in appendix, I believe appendix 27, talks about how, sorry, appendix 18 talks about how, religious practices that are not specifically, instituted, specifically mentioned in the Quran, constitute a religion other than submission, right? So they're not following submission entirely. Their religion has now been corrupted, so there's no like number, or limit that you would put. Like, for example, they're doing this one thing apparently right now. This is the one thing that you're aware of, right? But if there are 10 other things, then you'd say, oh no, I don't feel comfortable going there. But right now it's just one, right? But my point is, there's no specific number that differentiates an idol worshiper from a worshiper. If someone starts believing Jesus is God, it's only one thing they're saying now. But at that point, they're no longer a submitter, they're an idol worshiper. And so in the same way, I see these people as idol worshippers. Yes, they're doing so many other things right, but the fact that they're doing this one thing, they have failed the test, and Satan has trapped them. You know, and as a result of that, you also see the effects of that, as you mentioned, if I understood you correctly, that a lot of these people are very much disconnected from a lot of things in the Quran, because they're totally absorbed in the worldly life. And and I've seen this in other places as well, right? And it's sort of direct result of that, because if the people are sincerely devoted to God alone, God will guide them to be better than that. God will guide them to have the correct perspective. People who are sincerely seeking the hereafter, God will not keep them confused and let them follow these kind of idols for friendship. you know and they will be guided. Obviously a lot of these people had sufficient chances to examine the truth, and they chose to follow falsehood, right? So I personally would run away from such people, and I will happily try to either find other submitters who do not have the same belief. And if I can't, until I do, I will do my prayers separately, like, because God says that you should have a Friday prayer with people. I mean, I cannot say, for example, that I don't find any submitters, so I'll try to find someone who's closest to submission, even though they are an idol worshiper, and I know it's proven to me from the Quran that they're idol worshippers, that I'll still go and pray with them. I will not. I will pray, myself, until I find someone who doesn't believe in these things. Someone who believes in God alone, following the Quran alone as a source of guidance. I mean, that is who people you're supposed to pray with, and that is the masjid you're supposed to go to, because God says about these masjids. God says you shall never pray in such a masjid where they, comfort those who oppose God and His Messenger, right? And they're dividing the believers, and they swear to God that their intentions are righteous. By all those other definitions, they qualify. So I would rather not hurt my soul by doing that. I would feel much safer for my soul to pray individually until I have other submitters that believe the same way as I do, and I can pray with them.
Mashallah, brother. I also wanted to add something. Like, imagine that you are with a community, brother Shahid, that like cuts the finger of a baby which is born, and you say like they're harmless, they are doing the contact prayers, but they are actually doing something evil. God gives us healthy babies, and then we go ahead and cut something. And you don't even want to be around those people. And mashallah, brother Suleiman, by the love of God, has prepared a video that if you just go ahead and watch the consequences of what happens to people undergoing that act, and also the people you're around, they might be parents, and they do that to their kids. So you don't want to be around them. Inshallah, God will guide you.
Yeah, mashallah. Yeah, actually, yeah, so in my childhood, so also I know myself also, my parents, they circumcised. So I was, afraid, before they do the circumcision, from childhood, I know that, oh, 3, 4 years or 5 years, they do this kind of thing. And in my life experience, I said, how come these people, God can do these things? And when, yeah, so, and in my life, and I remember, because I, born in a rural village, and that time, and there is no doctor, there is some kind of people, and they come to house, and I don't know what instrument they are using to do these things. And there is so many chaos and accident, and one of my, like, the second cousin, and he died because of this issue, and I remember all of these things. So, and that's why I said, how can God do this such things? And
Mhm.
also, if I show them the verses 22:78, no, Surah 22:78, you shall strive for the cause of God as you should strive for His cause. Uh, uh, he has chosen you and has placed no hardship on you in practicing your religion. So God says He has placed no hardship on you in practicing your religion. So, so this is a real hardship, who has no money, like a poor person, and immediately they have a child and they have to do the circumcision. And nowadays they have to pay a lot of money for this one. And also the burden of the family and the burden of this person, the child. So this is, contradict of this these verses, firstly. And not only this, I saw so many verses, so many verses. God perfected the design, so many verses. So I don't know how they, support these things. And
Mhm.
yeah, so say for example, like we are like say 12 submitters. So say 10 of them say like, okay, they agree with this circumcision. Say 2% they confuse, they agree or not agree, or something like that. And so this is the way. And the people I said, the worldly life is not the submitter community, is from
Okay.
the like traditional
Okay, from the other
Sunni, the other,
people, right, right.
yeah, from the other people, yeah,
Okay, you
yeah.
said community, so I I thought you were talking about people in your community of submitters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, these other people. Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't, to me, like, I don't want to use the term submitter loosely. Submitter is not a label, right? It's a description of someone who submits to God alone, right? So when people say they're submitters, I mean, nowadays everybody calls themselves submitters. People are following three prayers, they also say they're submitters. And then there are people that are doing circumcision, they also say we're submitters. But submitters are those people, I mean, who are actually submitting to God's commands, who are actually following the religion of submission. Submission, the religion of submission is about following the Quran alone as a source of guidance, right? Worshiping God alone. And so these people that that are believing in these things, they're no longer submitters, right? God talks about people becoming disbelievers after becoming submitters, right? So, for example, there are people that are considered submitters until God gives them information, let's say about the mathematical miracle, and they reject, right? Then God says they become disbelievers after having acquired faith because now they're rejecting, right? And so the same way, if you tell these people that, hey, this is not part of your religion, and they say yes, then they're no longer submitters. I mean, and if you listen to the messenger of the covenant, right, he says a definition of a submitter is someone who finds nothing objectionable in the Quran, right? When you tell these people that God has created man in the perfect design, and or say we should follow God alone, then they still have this objection, right? They still have the objection that no, doctors say that this is better, or so and so said that we Abraham did this, for example, right? That's not from the Quran, right? They're not justifying it from the Quran. They're justifying it from other sources. They're saying, "Oh, Lisa Spray's put this in her book." Who's Lisa Spray? You know, is Lisa Spray God? Or they say, "Well, Rashad mentioned Rabbi Judah, so Rabbi Judah said this in his book." I mean, who's Rabbi Judah? You know, you're following the Quran alone, and the messenger's words are very clear. He said that if you find it in the Quran, you follow it. If it's not in the Quran, we have nothing to do with it, right? And everything as far as the Quran is concerned, I mean, we have so many proofs that this is beyond a doubt, like proven to these people, right? But they still want to follow their personal opinion. They still want to follow these innovations, right? So I don't call them submitters, right? The messenger of the covenant has talked about it in a Quran study where someone obviously from a Christian background in Tucson, asked about the covenant of Abraham, right? In the Bible, only thing mentioned about Abraham is none of the five contact prayers or zakat or hajj or fasting. Only thing that is mentioned is the covenant of Abraham and circumcision, right? So we know that it's tampered with. And so someone asked him in the Quran study, in an audio Quran study that we have, and he said there's only one covenant that Abraham did with God, a covenant, he said. And he mentioned, like, he stressed on a, like there's a covenant that, Abraham did as far as the Quran is concerned. And he said that covenant is mentioned in the index. And if you look in the index, it talks about 4125, 124, 125, which talks about, purifying the Kaaba. And so it's proven that, from the Quran that, the correct covenant of Abraham was that which is mentioned in the Quran and nothing to do with circumcision, right? But then these people still have no proof now to support it. But, they have all these, disconnected ideas which they use to try to justify it. So obviously they have no basis, right? So if someone's doing that and insisting on their point of view with no basis from the Quran, I mean, would you still consider them submitters? Would you still say these people are submitters?
So this is the
Right? Like, I wouldn't say, for example, a Deep Yuxil, that I wouldn't say he's a submitter. But why would I not say that? Because it's not just one, but it's easy for me to say that because he's doing it to a number of different ideas, right? There's like abortion, and there's three prayers, and so a couple other things, not doing Hajj and stuff like that. But then you have this one group where they're doing this one thing. I mean, this is, by the way, I mean, this is not the only thing. There are other things about them, right? But this is one that easily stands out to everybody. That's like one of the most basic things. So they're out of the religion, but it's difficult for people because they see them doing other things, right? But like I said, it's not about how many things they're doing. It's about the principle. Once they're out of it, once they're admitting to not following the Quran alone, Satan has got them, right? Satan only is trying to catch them by the principle. He doesn't have to catch them by the number of things, right? I mean, if you're following one thing outside if you're following everything from the Quran, and as a source of guidance, and you decided to take one thing from another source, then is Quran still your only source of religious guidance? No, it's not. Now you're falling to idol worship. How many idols do you need to have in your life to become an idol worshiper? Just one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very hard question here, brother. Yeah, because there is no submitter community, submitter, and there is some people, and there is so misunderstanding, so differences.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the people who added the two false verses, right? At the after Muhammad passed away, right? So, I mean, would we say that those people that added the two false verses because even though they added the two false verses, everything else is still intact, right? They were seemingly following submission, right? So, but I wouldn't say those people were submitters anymore
Mm,
because they added the two false verses. Now, what is the practices of submission? It is the practical scripture that God gave to Abraham. Just like God gave written scripture, the Quran, to Muhammad, he gave this practical scripture to Abraham. And these people added this practices in his religion, the practical scripture. They added this. So, should I still call them submitters? I don't believe so.
mashallah. Yeah. Any other comments in this regard? Any issue, brother Ali? Uh, anything?
I'm sorry, I missed the part. What did you say?
No. You have any comments about this issue submission? I asked the question about this. So, what will be your decision? In this scenario?
You mean about the circumcision?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I missed the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, Ali, he's asking about whether he should pray with those people or not.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. This is I'm actually struggling with some situation where I'm looking into this big group where there are few people that I'm not comfortable with, but the rest of the people are okay. So I'm just observing them, and I'm just going as the time goes. But there will be a time when I get to that point where this is not, then I don't want to worship with community that is idolizing something else that is not part of religion. uh, if they're if they're promoting in their group that we have to do this, if they're secretly following, that is up to them. But if they're openly promoting in their community that everybody must follow this commandment, if they don't want to follow, then they are not part of our community. Then what happens is, over time you may become one of them, because God says in the Quran, Surah 18, that force yourself to be the one who, I'm paraphrasing that verse, to obey God day and night, remember God day and night, because these are the people you're supposed to be forced with. If you follow other people, sooner or later, eventually, they will start influencing you, because the community, the people that you hang out with, they will strongly influence you. And I will even go to that point, that if you have friends that you give them message, even Messenger of the Covenant says that, and the verse that God does not enjoin you to be uh, with the friend with those people. I'm paraphrasing, those who don't actively fight with you. But then he mentions something very, very special. He says that even though God does not enjoin you to be friend with those who don't fight you, but he says there comes a point when people give you final word that I don't want to take that message. Don't talk to me about religion. You is your religion, to me is my religion. So that person eventually is you. Now this person is enemy of God. Okay, will you be a friend of someone who's enemy of your father or your mother? Of course not. If I know that person is enemy of my mother, he hates my mother, I don't want to hang out with this person. But let's take it to a million notch up, to our creator. Now this person is enemy of God. My God is million times higher than my mother. Do I want to be friend with this guy? Do I want to hang out with this guy? Of course not. So that is the ultimate thing. But hanging out with the community, I personally don't want to. I mean, I see Suleman's situation. He left the community, and if I were there, may God make me strong, that I would have done the same thing. If they were promoting something is not in the religion, I would say fine. I'd rather do my contract prayer alone in home, doing 4 units until I found another good submitter. But until then, yeah, mashallah, I will follow him. When he told me about the circumcision, that was a shocker to me. It's back like a year and a half ago or something. And then I listened to him, and God says, whenever you get information, investigate and search. And he gave me a link of a video. I watched the video, and I searched so many videos online. I searched on my own. As I'm also in the medical profession, I looked it through my understanding, and everything that make perfect sense. It's not in the religion. It's not part of the religion. It's coming from outside. And then if I am doing it, or even though I don't have my son is already older now. I was thinking, even though I may not have another son, or then do I still believe in it? My belief is the one counts. You know, and yeah, and mashallah, I thank God, and I thank God that He taught me through Suleman that this is not part of the religion. And even if you have slight belief, even though you have no boys in your family, even the belief that can take you to hell, because you have put like a cyanide poison in your religion that can destroy your religion. So as much as we can run away from idolizing anything, then the better it is for us, because maybe it is not, maybe not. As the messenger of the covenant was debating with another Muslim, he said maybe it's part of shahada, or maybe it's not, that mentioning Muhammad. But if you see slight chance of idolization, you want to run away from that. Maybe it's idol worship, maybe it's not. But if you see sense a little bit, you run away from that. And God sees your intentions. He sees my servant is so careful about being idolized. So He will bless you even more, mashallah. Praise God.
Right. I also want to say that, like what you said, like, for example, if they're promoting it openly or secretly, that becomes a deciding factor. I don't see that as a factor. If they're promoting something against the Quran, that is idol worship, if they're doing it openly versus secretly, it doesn't make a difference, right? That is not a criteria in itself from the Quran, even, which, by the way, in this case, they're not promoting secretly. They're open about it. Like, they say, yes, this is what they believe, right? And if you say that you don't believe that, you know, then, and you oppose it, then it will become very clear, like, what they portray you as, right? If someone's saying this is right and other people are saying they're confused about it, that's one thing. But if you say that no, you don't believe that, then you can find out what they think of you at that point, and you can decide whether you want to be with them or not. But everybody's opinion is on one side, but as far as God is concerned, you have to see what God says, right? And you have to make your decision based on that, right? Because God says in Surah 9, verse 108 about masjids. Look at the subtitle. It says masjids that oppose God and His Messenger. Surah 9, verse 107. It says, there are those who abuse the masjid by practicing idol worship, dividing the believers, and providing. So there are believers in there, right? There are believers in there, but they divide them by promoting other things and providing comfort to those who oppose God and His Messenger. When God and His Messenger is telling you to worship God alone and to follow the Quran as your only source of guidance, then they provide comfort to those people who oppose God, uh, right? Who oppose God and His Messenger. They provide comfort to them, and they solemnly swear our intentions are honorable. God bears witness that they are liars, right? And then God says, do not pray in those masjids. You shall never pray in such a masjid that is established on the basis of righteousness from the first day is more worthy of your praying there. In it, there are people who love to be purified. God loves those who purify themselves, right? So people who love to be purified will not be people who will, want to embrace these types of ideas. There will be people who love to purify themselves, who love to rid themselves of these types of innovations rather than follow them, right? So based on these verses, it doesn't fall in the description of a masjid you're supposed to pray in, right? Because they are practicing idol worship, they are dividing the believers, They are providing comfort to those who oppose God and his messenger, and their practices are not devoted absolutely to God alone. There are certain practices that are not devoted to God alone, right? Circumcision, we cannot say, is a practice that is devoted to God alone. So it's a masjid where the practices are not devoted to God alone. And if you ask me, like, officially or unofficially, like, I know these people that you're talking about, right? And they're very, like, closely connected to the Masjid of San Jose, very, very closely. And so they even though there's two people confused, they're still hoping that those two confused people will believe, or eventually they will be kicked out, right? So it's not even a place where people are trying to decide or people are trying to study and seek the truth. There are people who have decided that it's not part of the. I mean, they know me very well, and they know where I stand also, and they know very well everybody in San Jose Masjid, where they stand on this and what they promote, and they have really strongly indoctrinated this belief into their system. They're going to all the conferences of San Jose group, and they're basically part of the circumcisionist group. So the answer to me is very simple, regardless of what anybody else thinks.
Mm. Okay, thank you, brother, for your
You're welcome.
your comment. Yeah, actually, now in this community, not all of them, I think the same group. Like some people, they go to like Masjid Tusan, and I don't know, some people is connected to the San Jose, or but it's mixed up. Whatever we have, a small
Right.
community,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
mixed.
even Mustard Tucson is the same, right?
Mm,
Mustard Tucson uh, has on their website the article that says, if you want to follow the religion of Abraham, this is what you will do. So they say it's not, God will not punish you if you don't do it, but if you do it, it's better because you're trying to follow the religion of Abraham, because they're saying God will not punish you because God didn't mention it in the Quran, but you should still do it because this is what Abraham did, and
mm,
which doesn't make any sense at all. It's like you have the Sunni people and the Shia people. The Shia people say you have to do it, and the Sunni people say no, it's okay if you don't do it. It's not obligatory. So
mm,
this is the example of San Jose versus Tucson. Tucson says it's like a sunnah that if you don't do it, you will not be punished. But if you do it, that's very good. You're a better submitter than everybody else.
mm,
But San Jose says no, you have to do it, right? But to me, both of them are saying the same thing. Both of them are saying it is submission, to do it. Both of them are telling you to uphold another source besides Quran, by telling you to follow an innovation that is satanic and attributing it to God, right?
mm,
In fact, if you go to their website, there is a Samira's perspective that they published. I believe it was in 2001, where this was published, and it's still on their website. So uh, and Tucson is actually worse in that case because they're the ones who came up with it first and promoted it to others.
mm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, mashallah, brother. I know I understand what you said, and I'm strongly with you on this one. And there are a lot of new submitters coming in that community. So I'm just, as for me, I can tell you about how strong I am. That is with my experiences. That my father was in town last week, and he called me, and then I didn't want to meet him. You know why? Because for a long time I gave him the submission message, and it's even more than I become a submitter. Like I've been a submitter over 6 years, and beyond that, for like maybe 10 years or 7-8 years, I've been studying Quran heavily, and then I've been telling him at that even that time that, Father, please read Quran. There's so much information in it, and he every time he just doesn't like it, he gets angry, and he said, don't talk to me about Quran. Then after submission, then I keep talking to him. My tone was changed, that I'm like more focused on worshiping God alone. And like 3-4 years ago, when he told me final word that don't talk to me about this stuff anymore, and I don't want to do with you anything about this, and use to your religion, me to my religion, and I will see you in 5 years. Let me see where your religion takes you. He gave me a straight warning that what you're worshiping is, he telling me that what I'm worshiping is wrong religion. It's a religion like in the sense of satanic religion. And then he said, I will see you in 5 years where your religion takes you. And and he doesn't want to meet me. And I mean, and then the words that came out of my mouth with God's grace is that, and I told him that I can never go wrong by worshiping my God alone. And I didn't even plan these words, and they came out like a reflex from my mouth. And so I didn't want to meet him. He tried to meet with me any possible. My own father, after 4 years in town, just 30 miles away, I didn't want to meet him because he's an idol worshiper. I have no feelings for him. I mean, this is how strong I am. But the community that I'm going with, there's a lot of new submitters, and I am just living. As soon as I make a decision, inshallah, with God's will, that will be. I mean, I would rather do my Jummah alone. I have no need for social gathering. Mashallah, I am more happy in remembering God alone. I drive 5-6 hours one way to go to see somebody in a patient long way, and I do zikr. I mean, I'm more happy doing it alone than in a gathering. I'm like become more antisocial person, so I don't need for these people or do Juma or have fun with them. It's just that I'm just observing, and inshallah, with God's help, things will be better. Just want to say that, mashallah.
Inshallah, I ask God, help me, to overcome, from this situation, inshallah. Well, thank you, brother. Yeah. So I have also some other questions. So should I do today or offline or next time, brother? I think it's almost 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask your questions. That's totally fine.
Okay. So is there any differences like the Quran, because the Quran you are following the version, or the Masjid Tusan is following the something different, or the some other. Is there anything? I heard about something that there is few versions. Some are following this version, some are following this version. Is there any issue? That tell me that which one is the correct one. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are like minor changes, but the thing is that um, the message is the
Brother
same.
Suleiman,
Yes.
sorry, brother. Can you repeat the question of the brother, because the question wasn't really clear.
Yeah. About the Quran, So there is, I heard that there is some, little bit different, Yeah, Brother Solomon said a message is same, but there is some minor correction, in the different version of the Quran. So whose version is following? The Masjid Tusan is Masjid Tusan is following the same version, the one you are following, or is different? Than Masjid Tusan one, because I download the Masjid Tusan one, and I read from there also. Because there is something, you can see, if you search something, and you can, there is so many, beautiful thing, to get the some, some verses to find out. So, is there any complication or anything wrong that I use that one, or is there any uh, uh, yeah, any error or any mistake?
Okay. Yeah, so like I was saying, there are minor changes, right? But again, the changes are not very significant, so you can read from any of them, but the thing is that um like uh what I feel is right is for example, the edition that was in progress when the messenger of the covenant passed away, you know
Mhm.
um that was released after he passed away, with the changes that he had directed.
Mhm.
So like it's better to follow one that is closely around the time that he was alive, right? Because what happened was, after he passed away, then several versions were printed, that had nothing to do with him, right? Like, for example, submission.org was another organization that was printing the Qurans, and Masjid Tucson was also another organization that were printing Qurans. And so they released a few versions after where they made changes, and then s- um, submission.org kept making changes, and then Masjid Tucson kept making changes, but then they eventually released a version where they went beyond like the version that was before he passed away, where there were a lot of obvious mistakes that he had said that need to be changed, and they didn't change it because they said, oh, we don't know like exactly what were the things he said, and some of them denied that he ever said anything that needed to be changed. So yeah, so basically there was a version that was released 1 year after he passed away, I believe, which was uh, the turquoise colored, like bluish color, right? um, and so that is one that I think is closest to what the messenger left. Now the thing is that there could be typos, for example, or things that you could say like uh, could be translated this way or that way, or weren't translated, or anything, right? But the thing is that if you are publishing something and you're saying that this is by Dr. Rashad Khalifa, but then you're making changes in it, then the thing is it's no longer his work, it's yours, and you're using him as an author, but you're making changes in it just because like you have the legal right to make editorial changes, right? But as far as God is concerned, I mean, you're not authorized to do things like that, right? I mean, he was a messenger of God, and God allowed him to do this, and um, people should respect his work and his life. And now that he's no longer there, people should stay away from making changes. And a good example of that was that after he passed away, some people like I think it was submission.org, they made some changes. They said, oh, Rashad was wrong about this one footnote, for example, and they changed it. And then they realized that they misinterpreted the footnote, and it was actually correct, and they reverted back to it. And so things like that. But if anybody comes across any of these versions and they pick it up, they're not going to be misguided by it. Obviously, if there's one version, obviously, that people shouldn't use, ironically, but they did, and it will tell you about the hypocrisy of some of these people, right? There was one version, the first version of the Quran, okay, the first ever Quran that was printed, with 19 appendices, right? It did. There weren't 38 appendices at the time, and this was before Dr. Rashad Khalifa, I believe, announced his messengership. There was a Quran that was published by him, and later on he said this Quran is obsolete, meaning you should not be using it. Information in it was obsolete, and why it was obsolete? Because it had things that were later revealed to the messenger of the covenant, that he had not included, and like several things, I think, including, uh, if I'm not mistaken, including the wrong shahada also was in that same version, right? And they used the circumcision people used that same version of the Quran, like they called it. They don't say it's from the same version because what the messenger of the covenant did was, when he published the book Computer Speaks, he also, at the end of that book, he also said, okay, this is the next combined, in that book I'm also printing the 19 appendices from the Quran, right? So at the end of Computer Speaks, those 19 appendices from the Quran were included in that publication. So then these people are so tricky. They don't say that, okay, we got this information about supporting circumcision that from the obsolete Quran. They say, oh, it's in computer speaks. They always say it's in computer speaks, but it's in that obsolete first version of the Quran, the last appendix, where also, I mean, even there, he's not saying that circumcision is anything from God or anything like that, but it's talking about the history of Abraham and his descendants, that Muhammad was going to be one of their descendants. So in the end note, like the footnote at the end, somewhere in that, it mentions the Bible verse that about the circumcision, right? So they took that to say, look, is that end note in this computer speaks, quote unquote, that there was a reference to a verse where the verse talks about circumcision from the Bible, and so now that means that it's from God. So obviously, my point here, to cut the long story short, is obviously you shouldn't follow that version, because that there has information in it that is not Quranic at all now. So, but these are the versions that are still outside. I mean, nobody will get misguided from using any of those, I believe. But there are certain things that people have added. For example, like in submission.org, there's a big section of editorial changes where it's just becomes a focus to highlight where the messenger, quote unquote, made mistakes, because that was their like sort of focus, that the messenger made mistakes about things, and trying, it kind of promotes doubt when people see that, and same with the others that work came after. They said, we made these changes here, and this was changed to this, and this was changed to that, and it just makes people wonder, like, what's going on. I mean, are you promoting this as God's scripture, as the messenger's work, or you just trying to promote the idea that he was wrong about this and that, and we made changes? It just doesn't sit well for newcomers. So other than that, everything else is not really different. Yeah, there's minor things like soul. Every soul is paid for her works. Some places it says every person is paid for her works, and some places it says submission. Other places it says Islam. But the messenger clearly said that it has to be changed to submission. you know. So which the Mazda Tucson, for example, ignores that, and they went back to the version. The half of it says submission, and the later half of it says like Islam and stuff. So it's not consistent.
Okay. Yeah, most of them I see they are like the appendices. All are same. I think like 38. I think the number. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know where there is anything up and down, but the appendices is almost all the same. And yeah, I used to read also from that yeah, submission.org. Yeah, the things you pointed out. Yeah, I read some of this, the editorial column, something like that, a long time ago. Yeah, even though there is so many things, they good about the submission.org. I got so many information from them. Yeah, I think it's true that you mentioned
Hmm.
that yeah, they put something, the error or mistake from, yeah, yeah, I read, long time ago. Yeah. So
MashaAllah, Brother Sulaiman, I have a question. So the ones that are being printed by Barnes and Nobles, are they which version are they?
They're the ones that like I was referring to are the ones we should be using.
Okay, good.
Right. Yeah.
MashaAllah.
The Blue Quran is okay, the first version, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I would like to only say that God leaves certain things for the disbeliever, the wicked people to pick out of stuff. I mean, God was running everything when the messenger came, and God would have completely had him issue one Quran and without anything. Like the first messenger talked about the zakat, that it was the traditional way, but when the information came to him from God, he said no, the zakat has to be done on every paycheck whenever you get money. So this thing that you mentioned about the circumcision, that from the Bible verse, that was,
I mean, is my understanding is how God says in Surah 33, that they say to glorify Muhammad, in Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi. They take that verse and they say that God and his angels sends blessing to the prophet. Oh, you who believe, you shall send blessings to the prophet. This kind of thing is to trick people to see what is in their heart. So leaving that verse and then messenger saying that no, we should not follow this, and for these wicked people, for them to promote something that messengers say that do not follow this book, but they pull out stuff just like the traditional Muslim did. So this is how God leaves some certain things that is we understand for these wicked people to expose themselves. Mashallah, I just want to say that. In Pakistan, I mean, it's just so crazy. They mention this verse so many times, in their prayers. Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu wa sallimu taslima. I mean, they just cherish this verse out of context, and then they will mention, well, watiullah wa watiur rasul, obey messenger, and we have to follow them. I mean, you don't see anything backing up this. I mean, you pull out verses from here and there, and you paste them together, and to promote your point. This is called idol worship. I mean, had God will, God would not have put this verse in Surah 33. That to trick people's mind. I mean, to expose them, basically, mashallah.
Yeah. So Ali, if someone asks you like, if you should pray with the circumcisionist or for Friday prayer, you should pray alone, like, what would you tell them?
No, if that's the case, like what you did, mashallah, I'd rather be alone doing prayers, doing for
give clear answer,
far better than going people like who are like that, no doubt, or any other kind of religious thing they have added into religion.
Because you know what it says in the surah here, it says such a building remains a source of doubt. As long as you keep praying with them and you keep congregating with them, you will have doubt in your mind. It says Surah 9 verse 110, it says such a building that they have established remains a source of doubt in their hearts until their hearts are stilled. God is omniscient, most wise. So they will keep putting these doubts inside of you, and the fact that they're not submitters at that time. I mean, what are they? If they're not submitters, they're hypocrites, because they're saying they're submitters, but they're not. They're idol worshippers. I mean, that's what a definition of hypocrite is. So if you're congregating with hypocrites and you're praying with them and all that, there are chances that they will rub off on you and you become one of them eventually, if you don't stop yourself.
Okay, brother. So I have another question. Okay, I think we can finish it within 3 minutes about the marriage. Because there is some like argument or the debate, something like. So, before the marriage, we have to set a dowry. So before set a dowry, so what I understood through the messenger of covenant, explained that you have to you have to have mutual instruction between the spouse, or Uh, so if can I talk to any person, like say before to set a dowry, then say to talk about the marriage, the marital relationship. So what will be the status of this relation before to set the dowry? It is an engagement, or if I talk to any person before set a dowry, so I keep
Do you
talking
talk
like,
to any person?
no, not me, like for the other person, so other person is doing something. I said, no, now you are in the stage of like as engagement, because you are talking to the person.
When you say talking to the person, like, you're not saying like talking, just like talking, right? What do you mean talking to the person? Like, you
Yeah.
be clear what you mean by
Okay,
talking.
okay. You know, Yeah, say someone is, talking, them is speaking with someone in the hope of in the future marriage, to be get married
Uh-huh.
each other, yeah. So
Like getting
and
to know the person, right? You mean?
yeah, yes, getting to know
Mhm.
the person.
Right.
So and the one person is submitted, the another person is not submitted yet. So the person is talking, like speaking like in the prospective submitter, So if he or she will be a submitter, then they'll get married. But the other things they like each other, but so they're getting to yeah they're speaking each other like getting to know. So what is the stage of relationship here? So in is it the engagement period now? Is what they are doing now or what?
Okay, I think it's very
Uh,
um
no,
no,
no.
no.
So,
So no, no. So the thing is, engagement is not just like you start talking to person and you means you're engaged, right? Engagement is like they actively decide to be engaged to each other, and usually they will formally make this announcement amongst themselves or with other people that they're actually getting engaged. Like engagement is not just a stage that you're not clear about. Either you're engaged to the person or not. So I mean, the thing is, you will not get engaged to someone who's not a submitter, in the sense that if they're an idol worshiper,
mhm,
God says you cannot get married to them, right? So engagement is a part of marriage, a stage of your marriage. So but you cannot decide to engage with someone who is an idol worshiper, right? So the first thing is, before you get engaged to someone, you want to find out if they are a monotheist person or not, right? If you find out they're a monotheist submitter, then you will, like, they could be Christian, but the thing
mhm,
is, when you talk to them about submission, they'll accept it. They'll say, okay, because God says, they will find nothing objectionable in the Quran. They could be Christian, but they'll obviously believe. And God says a believing person is better than an idol worshiper, no matter how much you admire their beauty, and even if you like them. So even if there's mutual attraction between you and a person who's an idol worshiper, you're not supposed to get engaged to them or get married to them, right? So you should not be engaged to a person that is not in falling in the definition. Does that answer your question?
yeah, I got little bit, yeah. So yeah, so the person is talking the other person in the hope of to become a submitter in the future. But their
Right.
relation is their relation is look like now. Say they are talking about the marriage, and that as sometimes they will talk the romantic way, as I believe. But the other person is not a submitter. So so is there is any scene that because the other person is not submitted yet, but the way the other person is approaching that person that in the hope of the future.
I mean, are they like holding hands and stuff or what?
No, they are in distance. Yeah, the one
Okay,
person
so
is
they're not
behind.
engaged.
Uh, yeah, so but they are talking like every day, every time. So if yeah, so how yeah.
Well, so they're not engaged, right? Basically, you're saying, are they engaged? If they're talking by just talking to someone, do you get engaged? You don't. It's a decision you make that you have decided to.
No, no, they are not decided to yet to get married, but maybe they'll decide because so the other person is waiting. The person is still idol worshiper, and maybe
Okay.
he'll become a like
Okay.
submitter.
Yeah. So then your question is it appropriate for them to have a romantic
Yeah,
relationship?
romantic or I still
Right.
yeah to talk about
Yeah.
the
Doesn't
their
sound right. Yes.
mhm.
Hmm.
So yeah. Yeah, so yes, so I said, because you are already in the engagement, like you spoke, like because the way you are, every day, or it's a romantic
Hmm.
things, yeah, even
Yeah.
though,
Hmm.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the other person is in the hope that maybe you'll get married to him or her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah, in my sense, like is a like as a is a like a engagement period, because the way they are talking, every day, even though the other person is not a submitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah. It's a common issue I've seen with a lot of people that call themselves submitters. That are been doing that. It's like a culture I see coming
mhm.
for. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So
So
do they also believe in circumcision?
no, other person is still, yeah, he's reading the Quran in like I think in the way of like submission. I think
It's a
hopefully
new
like
submitter or what?
and yeah, prospective submitter. Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so the other, yeah, so they said, they are not in the engagement now, even though the way they, talk each other, or they have the feelings. So it's look, my sense is look like an engagement period.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the thing is, you're right. The thing is that, I mean, unless people are engaged, that people should not like have this type of a relationship. I mean, God encourages people to get engaged. That's the whole idea. Is if you want to get to know a person, you have to get engaged to them. Is how you get. First of all, you shouldn't get engaged to a person who's an idol worshiper.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if and until that point, you should not have like a romantic relationship with the person, like holding hands or even not holding hands. I mean, you shouldn't have a romantic relationship with people you're not engaged to, right? So this is wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nowadays,
like it's like,
nowadays.
and they will probably date each other. They will go places together and hang out in places and stuff like that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and but this is all wrong. I mean, this is not God's way of getting to know a person. You want to know a person, you don't casually date people. And when I say date, I don't necessarily mean that you have sex with them, but I mean, you don't casually just like take people out and to places and hang out with them in privacy and all this stuff, right? I mean, this is not what God teaches us.
No, no, they are long. They live different countries, but they talk. But nowadays, yeah, you can see the people. You can kiss even by even by telephone. So there's so many things you can do
Right,
even
yeah,
long
exactly.
distance. So
Yeah,
that kind
and
of
so they
relation.
shouldn't do that. Yeah, people should
Mhm.
if you want to formally know a person, if you decide the person is right for you, you want to formally know them, you should get engaged to them, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so engagement period is like getting to know each other, right? This is the period, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When you just
But you
decide
have
to
to let the other person know that you're getting engaged to them, right? It's not like maybe I'm engaged, maybe I'm not engaged. It's
Mhm,
not doesn't work like that. You just start talking about
mhm,
intimate things,
mhm.
right?
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the, yeah, that's the why now I answer, so the getting to know period is actually the engagement, yeah, the getting to know
Yeah.
each other. Yeah, because you have attraction for someone, then you let him know or her know that okay, now let's talk each
Get
other, or
engaged.
at a young age,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 but
Yeah.
because
But I
we
mean, it's a formal thing, you can't get engaged to, for example, two people at the same time, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you let the person know that we're getting engaged. Engagement is also like a contract, right? So
contrary,
you let the other person know that, hey, let's get to know each other, and
mhm.
it's not just something that is like implied, you know.
Okay. Uh, so is there any requirement that to get a like mutual attraction? Should I just engage like 2 3 years with a person and then have a mutual attraction or something like that?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
The mutual attraction. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so the other person said no, because to have a mutual attraction, So that's why I am engaging, just to get to know each other. So when I just I spend some, like I have some conversation with the guys, so so like 6 months, 8 months, then I will decide that I have the mutual attraction or not. Is it?
Well, see, the thing is, you have to like the person. Like, you can't be engaged to a person that you don't even like, right? I
Mm-hmm,
mean, you have intention to marry a person. If you have intention to marry a person, I mean, that's when you get engaged to them, right? But it's not like you have to be, uh, you know, it's not like you have to be madly in love with them, right? But it's somebody that you can think of yourself wanting to like them, or you feel some kind of a attraction towards them, right? uh
mm-hmm,
it's not exactly love right away, because love is something that develops as you get to know them. So they're right about that, right?
mm-hmm,
You get to know a person over 1 or 2 years, and whatever that period is, a sufficient amount of time, right? And
mm-hmm,
God puts love in your hearts, and He puts love in your hearts, you're meant for each other, you go ahead with the marriage, right?
mm-hmm.
But before that, you can't get engaged to a person that you have no feelings for, or have any possibility that you may like them, right? So you have to
Yeah,
have
that's
some sort of attraction to
mm-hmm,
them,
mm-hmm.
not necessarily love,
Yeah.
but you have
Then
to have
getting
some.
to know. Yeah, then
Yeah,
getting to
yeah,
know. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
that's my idea, and I said, yeah, this is how I understand about the from the Rashid Khalifa, and I said, no, he,
Hmm.
and the other person said, no, no, you don't believe, you don't follow all of this teaching of Rashid Khalifa. I said, no, I am,
Oh.
but yeah, how can then you spend like 2 years for with the one person, then getting to
Hmm.
know, then and do the announcement after
Hmm.
they they do the announcement for engagement. Then
Hmm.
again they said after engagement and they set the dowry and maybe they can spend another 1 year to get get to know each other. I said when you set a dowry, that means you are a contract to get married now.
Hmm.
Now, after setting the dowry, so do
Hmm.
you have to wait again another 6 months and 1 year to know each other? It it doesn't make sense. When you set a dowry, then you marry now. You can take 1 day, 2 days, or 1 month. This okay, but after set a dowry, then how can spend another time to get to know each other?
Hmm.
You got my point? You see, yeah.
Right. So they're saying that they don't have to like a person to get engaged to them, or you're saying they say they don't have to get engaged to them. They have to first like the person, so they spend 1 or 2 years getting to know them, and
Yes,
then they
yeah,
get engaged.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, the second one, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, to like them, to just getting to know, like 6 months, 1 year. So when they
Hmm.
like them, and they announce the engagement now.
Right, right, right. Hmm.
Is it correct way?
No, no,
Yeah, yeah.
I see that, if you like someone, like to
Mm-hmm,
some degree, then the right way is you get engaged with
mm-hmm,
them, and during that process you intimately try to know each other,
mm-hmm,
and then you can set the dowry if you want during that time, or later,
mm-hmm.
and you set the dowry and then you go ahead with the marriage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
I
I
mean,
understand.
it's very, the thing is, like, when you get so many different opinions from so many different people, everybody has an opinion, right? And it can
Mm-hmm,
get very confusing. So what I would just say is, watch the sermon by Dr. Rashad Khalifa about marriage.
mm-hmm,
He explains this in very simple terms, you know,
mm-hmm.
but people have the tendency to complicate things, and add things or confuse people, right? So.
Yeah, Mashallah, I understood the way you explain. That's
Hmm.
the thing. Yeah, because getting to know this is the engagement period.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, before I like any person, why I am getting to know. So this is my issue.
Hmm.
So it's
Right.
like that. Yeah. So
Hmm.
after getting like 2 years or
Yeah.
1 year or six
Hmm.
months, then you
Yeah.
announce the people that so it's not looking nice.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And you're
Yeah.
flirting in this time with a bunch of people.
Oh, yeah, that's
Because
also, yeah.
because you have no commitments with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is not a moral society.
Yeah, mashallah.
Yeah,
Okay, well. Yeah, mashallah, brother. Yeah, praise God. Yeah, you
mashallah.
have answered most of my questions today. Inshallah, yeah. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, mashallah, yeah.
Okay, so if there are no other comments or questions for anybody, God willing, we can conclude our studies. Thank you all for joining. God willing, our next English study would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, by the way, before we go, actually, I want to say that it's we can recite Al-Fatiha for Masood. It's his birthday.
Oh, thank you, brother.
He's 1 year old.
MashaAllah.
Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.